So we've understood how we periodise. We've then decided what testing, screening are we going to start to implement and value to influence our program, influence and gauge our results. Now, from an overarching standpoint, what does our strength and power program look like, first off and foremost? We'll get into our energy system development, and we'll also delve into the nuts and bolts of this. This is kind of like a bird's eye view of a strength and power program. Philosophy, where do you start? How do you write it? How do you set it up? How do you make sure it's effective within a team environment? First and foremost, principles. Sport-specific strength and conditioning recognises that there are more similarities between differing sports than there are differences. It's one of my favourite sayings, because so many people, especially athletes and skills coaches, think their sport is so unique to anything else that possibly could exist on the planet. Going to the NRL, that is the definition of thinking it's so unique. Every guy, NRL's a bit different. It's not. There is unique aspects to every sport, no doubt about it. In fact, I'm sure most people here that have worked with athletes could see athletes that have maybe been walking in and out and almost take a guess what sport they play. They have a look. An AFL player has a look. A tennis player has a look. A soccer player, football, has a look. You can kind of pick them. You know, if they've got Umbro on, they're not a rugby league player. You know, Gioca socks do not scream AFL player. So they've got their fashion sense, so they've all got those nuances. But when it comes to physical development, there is a hell of a lot more similarities than differences. Now, if you want to try and pick swimming and soccer, yes, there's clear differences there. But when we look at even swimming and soccer, what, as a coach, can I influence? And I'm going to assume I can't influence technique. I'm not teaching a freestyler how to do a proper stroke, to grab and drag, okay? But one of the biggest physical influences I can make in a swimming individual is their start and their turn, because they produce a lot of force, and it's with contact, the same as in a gym. So I would probably select something like a squat. High force, vertical projection, knee dominant, really good. Things like sleds, slight vertical projection angle that I can use in a similar position as they do when they take off from the blocks. These are valuable things. I'm probably doing the same with a soccer player. So even something as obscure as those two sports, as a strength and conditioning coach, the key aspects that I can influence are actually pretty similar. Now, obviously, there's going to be some unique things we add into a swimmer versus a soccer player. I'm not saying that, but the rocks of it are often quite similar. And that's where this comes from. And when we dive into a sport, when you're working just with a sport, positionally and individually, most people are very similar. Because we are going to go through archetypes and the differences you see, but ultimately differences between athletes and the way they present and athletes' positions are only slight adjustments you make to a program. They are not you going, this is my midfielder program, and you're writing it, and then you go, thank God I did that. Now this is my forwards program, and they're doing something completely different. And the reason I'm so passionate about people identifying the similarities is because when you train in a team environment, team athletes love being a team. You get far more out of training as a team than you do as an individual, for the most part. One of the most successful sport/training methodologies, CrossFit, bank on everyone doing the same thing, not just in that gym, but on that day around the world. Like the workout of the day came from uniting every single person on the planet. They can all open internet, app, phone, whatever it is, find out what that workout is, and they all compete at it, and then they all try and beat times. And now they've made a whole sport about doing that. Like their whole premise is based on we all do the same thing. Doesn't matter if you're tall, short, big, small, male, female, they'll adjust some weights, but we're all doing it. Get in there, get it done. Yeah, it's a handstand walk. Fuck, let's just all do it. Like it's so united that they can throw stuff like that in and no one even blinks. So yeah, you're riding a bike underwater and it's whoever can go faster. Fucking let's do it. But everyone just buys in because it's like, yeah, we're going to do it. Now, for sport specificity and transferability, that's a little bit harder. But the premise is still the same, that if I can find, instead of trying to differentiate as many programs as I can, if I can find the common thread for as many players as I can, then they can work together. They can help each other. They can compete against each other. So for someone to not do a box squat when the team's doing a box squat, there's got to be a bloody good reason. Because I know, if my girls here, if I've got 9 girls box squatting and 1 trap bar deadlifting, you now start to separate the group. Again, not to say I'd try and have a cookie cutter drill program for every single player to do exactly the same thing, but the intention needs to come from not how I can make everyone's really individual, but how can I try and keep everyone's to the same theme, the same stream, and work together. And typically, I'll show you how we do it here and how I've done it previously, but ultimately your big rocks, the start is where we keep together and we slowly start to individualize as it gets lower down that programming. But having that mentality will make a big difference to your programming. Team sport athletes are often elite sports people, not elite lifters. So that often means the nuance of a power lifter or a weight lifter, where making these slight modifications have a huge effect on their results. You don't see that as much in a team sport athlete. Team sport athlete utilising accommodating resistance, I'm going to talk about, I think it's great, but will not have this nice carryover to their next block for 1RM like a power lifter and Olympic lifter. There's a lot we can get out of it in a team sport environment, but it's not always the same as what you'll see typical research or typical applications have. The same as contrast training, complementary training, utilising post-activation potentiation, so using a lot of muscle fibres in a heavy lift, then trying to translate it across. You don't have 7 minutes to rest between exercises in a team sport environment. So you're not going to get the same effect. But the effect of a true transfer, sometimes you may not get. But the transfer from a mentality standpoint, you can. And what I mean by that is if I box squat someone and then 3 hop them for distance, I'm not always doing that because I believe that that exercise has magically made them jump further here. It can. I'm not saying it can't, it can. And we've shown it does with proper rest and transferability. But in a team environment, the energy and flow of them box squatting and then committing to a 3 hop, I know they're getting their most out of it. They're pushing hard. And when you're doing that in team environment, for those that are in the room that have done this type of movement, you kind of know the energy's there. When I'm using a 3 hop purely in a velocity block, sometimes the warm-up mentality is still there. They're not executing at full rate. Even though I rate velocity blocks, we do a velocity block here. In fact, we do our jumping early and then into our strength lift. For more advanced lifters where I really want to focus on power output, I will use it in a contrast or complementary fashion, not necessarily because I believe PAP is the be-all and end-all and it's going to show great results, but I know that the effort, energy that they're going to put into it is far better than if I do it early on where their mentality is still prep. I ranted for a bit there. Hopefully I didn't lose anyone. All good? All right. Sporting transferability. So I much prefer the term transferability than specific. Because some things, when we talk specific, people think it should look like the sport. Quite the opposite. Transferability often doesn't always look like the sport. We want to think of transferability of 1, biomotor abilities. Are we using the right energy systems? Are we targeting the right force application? Maybe right force direction as well. Are we hitting enough velocity work based on the position or the requirements of the sport? Not always it needs to look like it. And the analogy I tend to use with a golfer, if you're working with a golfer, some people inappropriately will grab a cable and use that to swing through because they're overloading the movement. Now, if you're a golfer in here, you'll probably cringe, but if you're doing that with load, because it is such a motor controlled based movement, as in there's a lot of fine adjustments that you need to make at high speeds, as soon as you change the load in which you're doing it with, everything changes to try and get the same outcome. But then when you go back to a club head, you now have the same outcome, but you've been overloading at a different velocity and rate of force development. So you, in fact, can stuff up quite substantially a golfer's swing by overloading the same pattern. So to be transferable, you actually have to be quite non-specific. You need to get them strong on two legs so they can then go and practice their swing with a stronger base of support rather than trying to make their swing stronger. So understanding where physical preparation starts and stops, and then motor control, tactical and technical learning starts is very important. In a game of rugby league, we cross over a lot more. They literally stand there and get hit by someone that they have to physically stop moving. Sounds like something we can help with in the gym. But golf, ice skating, swimming, technical transfer, all these things that are a little bit more unique, you've got to accept what we can't influence. We can give them all the tools, but then it's up to their skills coach or their sporting coach to be able to transfer that over. And sometimes chasing too much specificity will ultimately be the undoing of it. And then the other part of that is the old unique sport specificity transition of knowing what they're doing from a loading standpoint and what you're doing in the gym. As an example, if you've got a volleyballer, they jump a hell of a lot. As a coach, you may be forgiven to think, well, I need to jump a lot because that's what they do in their sport. But if they're doing 1,100 jumps every training session and you're bringing them in here doing 3 sets of 3 hop for distance, well, one, are you influencing what they're doing? But 2, are you actually just overloading a pattern they're already doing and now risking for injury? So this paradox of sport specificity exists as well, where as a coach,